Maya Torres had learned to see people that others made invisible. It was a skill developed over 5 years working in social services, honed by a childhood watching her own mother struggle with homelessness, and maintained now despite having left that world behind. So when the man in tattered clothes and a dirt-smudged face walked into the Harrison, an upscale restaurant where entrees started at $40, Maya saw him immediately. She also saw her manager, Richard, moving to intercept him with the kind of polite hostility reserved for people who clearly didn't belong. "Sir, I'm sorry, but this is a private establishment. Perhaps there's a shelter nearby that could—" "I'll handle this," Maya said, stepping between Richard and the man. She looked directly at the stranger, making eye contact the way most people refuse to do with homeless individuals. "Hi, can I help you?" The man's eyes, surprisingly clear despite his disheveled appearance, met hers with something like surprise. I'm hungry. I was hoping maybe someone could spare some food." "Of course. Come sit down." Maya gestured to a table in her section, ignoring Richard's sharp intake of breath. "Maya, we can't just—" "Richard, he's a person asking for food." "We have food. I'm handling it." Maya turned back to the man. "What's your name?" "John." The answer came quickly, almost too quickly. "Nice to meet you, John. I'm Maya. Let me get you something to eat." "Do you have any allergies or dietary restrictions I should know about?" John shook his head, seemingly stunned that she was treating him like an actual customer. Maya brought him water, bread, and then a full meal. The beef stew that was the daily special, salad, and more bread. She didn't make a show of it, didn't call attention, just served him the way she'd serve anyone else. "Thank you," John said quietly when she set down the food. This is really kind. It's basic human decency, not kindness, just treating you like a person." Maya refilled his water. "Take your time. No rush." She went back to her other tables, very aware that Richard was watching with disapproval and that some of the regular customers were whispering. But Maya had learned long ago that caring what wealthy people thought of her was a waste of energy. What she didn't notice was how John was watching her. How his eyes tracked her movements as she helped an elderly woman with her menu, laughed at a regular's terrible joke, and efficiently managed a table of demanding business executives. How he seemed to be studying her more than eating. After John finished, Maya brought him a to-go container. "I packed you some extra bread and a couple of those chocolate cookies we serve with coffee. For later. I don't have money to pay for this." "I know. That's okay. It's taken care of." Maya had planned to pay for it herself, the way she often did when serving people who couldn't afford their meals. "Why?" John asked, and there was something in his voice, a testing quality Maya couldn't quite identify. "Because you were hungry and we had food." "That's not complicated. Most people wouldn't have let me in the door. Your manager certainly didn't want to. Most people are wrong about a lot of things, including what homeless people deserve." Maya started clearing his dishes. "Are you staying anywhere tonight?" "It's supposed to get cold. I can give you information about shelters." "I'll be fine." John stood, and Maya noticed again how his clothes were dirty but not actually torn. How his hands, while grimy, didn't have the calluses or scars she usually saw on people who'd been on the streets long term. Something felt off, but she couldn't place it. "Okay, but if you need help, St. Mary's shelter is 6 blocks east. Tell them Maya sent you. They'll make sure you have a bed." John studied her for a long moment. "You do this often?" "Help people like me? I help people who need help." "That's not specific to any group." Maya felt herself bristling slightly at the phrasing. "Is there something else you need?" "No, you've been very kind. Thank you, Maya." John left, and Maya went back to work, thinking the interaction was over. 20 minutes later, John returned. Except he wasn't John anymore. The dirt was gone from his face. The tattered clothes were replaced by an expensive suit. The whole homeless persona had been a costume, and standing in front of Maya now was someone who very clearly had never missed a meal or lacked a place to sleep. "What the hell?" Maya stared at him. "My name isn't John. It's Ethan Blackwood. I own the Blackwood Property Group, and I've been testing people, seeing how they treat someone they perceive as beneath them." "Maya, you passed, spectacularly." He pulled out a business card. "I'd like to offer you a job. My company values people who show genuine compassion. Someone like you would be an asset." Maya felt fury rising hot and sharp. "You were testing me? You dressed up as a homeless person to see if I'd treat you like shit. To see if you'd treat me like a human being. Most people failed, including your manager. But you— Get out, Ethan blinked. Excuse me? Get out of my restaurant now. Maya's voice was low but shaking with anger. You think homelessness is a costume you can put on? You think poverty is a game you can play to test people's morality? That's disgusting. That's using other people's real suffering as your personal experiment. I was trying to find people with genuine character. By lying to them. By pretending to be vulnerable. By treating homelessness like it's a joke or a test instead of a reality that kills people every winter. Maya stepped closer. My mother was homeless when I was 12. She died on the streets because people like you decided she wasn't worth helping. Don't you dare come in here with your fake poverty and your real privilege and act like you've discovered something profound about humanity. I didn't mean to offend. You didn't mean to offend? You performed homelessness like it's a role you can take off when it's convenient. Real homeless people don't get to do that. They don't get to wash off the dirt and put on a suit and be taken seriously again. Your little test is insulting to everyone who's actually struggled. Maya grabbed his business card and tore it in half. Take your job offer and your self-righteous social experiment and get out. I don't want to work for someone who thinks poverty is a costume. Ethan stood frozen, clearly not expecting this reaction. I'm trying to do something good. To find people with integrity. If you wanted to find people with integrity, you could have donated to homeless services. Volunteered at a shelter, actually helped people instead of playing dress-up. But you didn't. You wanted to feel superior. To test people and judge them. That's not integrity. That's ego. Maya turned away. I have actual customers to serve. People who aren't pretending to need help to feel better about themselves. She walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the restaurant looking stunned. Richard approached immediately, clearly having heard the confrontation. Maya, do you have any idea who that is? Ethan Blackwood owns half the real estate in this city. He could destroy this restaurant, then let him. I'm not apologizing for calling out someone who treats homelessness like a social experiment. Maya grabbed her order pad. I have work to do. The rest of her shift was tense. Richard was furious. Other servers whispered, but Maya refused to feel guilty. She'd spent too many years watching wealthy people treat poverty like entertainment to tolerate Ethan's test. After work, Maya did what she did every Thursday night. She went to St. Mary's shelter with bags of leftover food from the restaurant. She'd been volunteering there since leaving social work, unable to completely disconnect from trying to help. Maya, Father Michael, who ran the shelter, greeted her warmly. You're a lifesaver. We're packed tonight. Temperature's dropping and everyone's trying to get inside. Maya helped serve dinner, talked to regulars she'd known for years, and listened to newcomers share their stories. This was real. Not a costume, not a test. Real people struggling with real problems that didn't disappear when someone decided the experiment was over. She was cleaning up when a voice behind her said, "You come here every week?" Maya turned to find Ethan Blackwood, still in his expensive suit, standing in the shelter's doorway looking completely out of place. "What are you doing here?" Maya demanded. "Following you. I wanted to apologize, and to understand why you reacted so strongly." Ethan looked around the crowded shelter, his expression uncertain. I knew homelessness was a problem, but I didn't really see it like this." "Of course you didn't. Because it's not a problem that affects you. It's abstract, something you can play with for an afternoon and then go back to your penthouse." Maya finished wiping down a table. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" "Because nobody's ever called me out like that. Usually people are too intimidated or too interested in my money to tell me when I'm being an asshole. But you did, and I'm wondering if maybe you're right. If maybe I have been treating this like a game." "There's no maybe about it. You absolutely were. The question is what you're going to do about it now that you know." "I don't know. That's why I'm here, to learn. If you'll teach me." Maya studied him. He looked genuine, but she'd learned not to trust wealthy people's temporary interest in poverty. They always lost interest once the novelty wore off. "Fine. You want to learn? Actually help. Don't just observe. Don't just write a check. Get your hands dirty. Serve food. Talk to people. Listen to their stories without judging. Can you do that?" "I can try. Trying isn't enough here. These people don't need your pity or your charity tourism. They need actual support. If you're going to be here fully. Not as an experiment. Not as research for your next business venture. As a human being helping other human beings." "Understood." Ethan took off his suit jacket. "Where do I start?" Maya handed him an apron. Start by serving dinner. And Ethan, if you treat anyone here like they're beneath you, I'm kicking you out personally. These people deserve respect. Not your social experiment part 2. I get it. I'll be respectful. Maya watched as Ethan nervously approached the serving line, clearly having never done anything like this before. He fumbled with the ladle, didn't know how to interact with people who weren't intimidated by his wealth, made awkward small talk that revealed exactly how little he understood about poverty, but he tried, and unlike Maya expected, he didn't leave after an hour. He stayed the whole evening, helped clean up, asked questions that were ignorant but genuine, and slowly, very slowly, started to look less like a billionaire slumming and more like someone genuinely trying to understand. This is harder than I thought, Ethan admitted as they finished cleaning. I thought I'd just serve some food, write a check, feel good about helping, but this is real. These are real people with complicated problems, and I have no idea how to actually help. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. And it's exactly where understanding starts. Maya grabbed her coat. Come back next week, keep helping, keep learning. Maybe eventually you'll figure out how to use your privilege for something more useful than testing people's morality. Will you help me figure out how to actually make a difference? Maya thought about all the reasons to say no, about how rich people always disappointed her, about how Ethan's test had been offensive and reductive, about how she'd already been burned by the system too many times to trust someone whose biggest problem was having too much money. But she also thought about the resources Ethan had, about how much good that wealth could do if directed properly, about the possibility, however small, that maybe she could turn his privilege into actual help for people who needed it. Maybe. But you're on probation. One hint that you're doing this for ego or publicity or another social experiment, and I'm done. Fair. I'll see you next week. After Ethan left, Father Michael approached Maya with a knowing smile. That was Ethan Blackwood, the real estate billionaire. What's his story? He's an asshole who's possibly trying to become less of an asshole. We'll see if it sticks. And you're going to help him? Against my better judgment? Yes. Because if I can point even one billionaire toward actually helping people instead of just testing them, that's worth the aggravation. You're a good person, Maya Torres. I'm a stubborn person who doesn't know when to quit. There's a difference. Ethan Blackwood returned to St. Mary's the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and the Thursday after that. What started as apparent penance slowly transformed into something that looked like genuine commitment. He served meals, helped with intake paperwork, even started learning people's names and stories. But Maya watched him with perpetual suspicion, waiting for the moment his interest would wane or his privilege would reassert itself. That moment came 6 weeks into his volunteering, during a particularly difficult night at the shelter. I don't understand why he won't just get a job, Ethan said quietly, referring to Marcus, a regular who'd been homeless for 3 years. They were restocking supplies in the storage room. There are help-wanted signs everywhere. He's capable. He just needs to try. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Marcus has severe PTSD from military service. He can't handle the sensory overload of most workplaces. He's tried 17 times in the past 2 years, gets fired within weeks because he has panic attacks. But sure, he just needs to try harder. I didn't know. That's the point. You don't know. You see someone who appears capable and assume their homelessness is a choice or a moral failing. You still think poverty is simple, that people just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's the same thinking that made you put on a costume and test people's humanity. Maya slammed a box of canned goods onto the shelf. You're still treating this like an intellectual exercise instead of lived reality. That's not fair. I've been here every week. I'm trying to understand. Trying isn't the same as understanding, and understanding isn't the same as believing. You're still fundamentally convinced that you're different from these people, that you earned your wealth through merit while they failed through weakness. That's a lie you tell yourself to avoid confronting how much of your success is luck and privilege. I'm not. Ethan stopped himself. Okay, maybe I am. Maybe I do still think that way sometimes. How do I change that? By getting honest about your own life. Tell me your story, Ethan. The real one. How did you become a billionaire? And don't give me the self-made man speech. I want the truth. Ethan was quiet for a long time. My grandfather started the company. My father expanded it. I inherited a real estate empire worth about $200 million when I was 25. I grew it to $2 billion by making aggressive acquisitions and leveraging existing assets. I like to tell people I started from nothing because it sounds better than trust fund baby took his inheritance and invested well. Thank you. That's the first completely honest thing you've told me. Maya turned to face him. Now, imagine you didn't have that inheritance. Imagine you'd grown up in poverty. Do you really think you'd have pulled yourself up to billionaire status through sheer merit and hard work? I'd like to think, be honest. Would you be where you are without that head start? No, probably not. I'd probably be, I don't know, middle class maybe, if I was lucky. And if you'd had bad luck, been born to addicted parents, had mental illness, faced discrimination, ended up homeless, I might be in this shelter asking for help instead of serving it. Ethan sank onto a crate. That's what you're saying, that the difference between me and them is mostly luck. Not virtue, not hard work, just circumstances I had no control over. That's exactly what I'm saying. And until you genuinely believe that, until you stop seeing homeless people as fundamentally different from you, you'll never actually help them. You'll just perform charity to make yourself feel better. So what do? How do I actually help? Start by using your wealth to change systems instead of just helping individuals. One shelter serving meals doesn't solve homelessness, but affordable housing policies do. Mental health funding does. Livable wages do. You have money and influence. Use them to fix the structures that create poverty, instead of just treating the symptoms. Ethan pulled out his phone, making notes. Okay, affordable housing. How? You're a real estate developer. You know how expensive housing is. You could build affordable units, not slums. Actual quality housing that people can afford on minimum wage. You could lobby for zoning changes that allow more density. You could fight against policies that criminalize homelessness. You could fund mental health services and addiction treatment. There are 1,000 things you could do that would matter more than serving soup once a week. Will you help me? I don't know how to do any of that. I know real estate development. I don't know policy or social services or how to build programs that actually work. Maya wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment when Ethan lost interest or decided this was too hard or complicated. But, looking at him, seeing genuine desire to change, she found herself nodding. Fine, but not for free. If I'm going to consult on this, you pay me. Market rate. I'm not your charity project, and I'm not doing emotional labor for a billionaire without compensation. Of course, name your rate. $80,000 annually. Part-time, 20 hours a week. I keep waitressing because I need stable income and I don't trust that you'll stick with this. Deal, but I'm paying you $100,000. 80 is below market for this kind of consulting. Don't inflate my salary to make yourself feel generous. 80,000 is fair for part-time work. Fine, 80,000. When can you start? Next week. I'll put together a proposal for what an actual comprehensive approach to homelessness in the city would look like. You review it. Decide if you're serious about funding it. If yes, we build it. If no, we're done, and you stop playing poverty tourist. They started meeting twice a week, Maya presenting research on housing policy, while Ethan took notes like a diligent student. She showed him data on how Housing First programs worked better than traditional shelters, how treating addiction and mental illness was more effective than criminalizing them, how providing stable housing actually saved money compared to emergency services and incarceration. This is overwhelming, Ethan admitted after a particularly data-heavy session. I thought homelessness was simple. Just give people housing and jobs. But it's this massive interconnected system of failures. Housing policy, mental health, criminal justice, addiction services, employment access. Everything's broken in ways that reinforce each other. Welcome to why I left social work. You spend years fighting one piece of a broken system while the other pieces keep creating more problems. It's exhausting. You save one person and 3 more fall through the cracks. Maya closed her laptop. That's why individual charity doesn't work. You need systemic change. That requires money, political will, and sustained commitment. Most people lose interest when they realize how hard it actually is. I'm not most people. We'll see. Everyone says they're committed until they actually have to sacrifice something meaningful. Talk is cheap, Ethan. Action is expensive. Then let me take expensive action. What's the biggest impact I could make right now? Not eventually. Right now. Maya had been waiting for this question. Buy the abandoned Riverside Apartments building. It's been sitting empty for 3 years. 200 units. The owner wants $12 million. You could renovate it and turn it into permanent supportive housing. Apartments for chronically homeless people with on-site mental health services, addiction support, job training. It's the housing first model that actually works. It would house 200 people who are currently on the streets. 12 million plus renovation costs, probably 18 million total. And then operating expenses of what, 3 million annually? About that. It's not a money-making investment. It's a public good. That's the point. Can you afford it? I can afford it. The question is whether I'm willing to spend money on something that won't generate profit. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I've spent my entire career measuring success by return on investment, by how much money I can extract from properties. This is the opposite of that. Yes, this is measuring success by human lives improved, by people getting stability, by treating housing as a human right instead of a commodity. If that's not interesting to you, tell me now so I stop wasting my time. It's interesting. It's also terrifying. Because I've never done anything that wasn't fundamentally about making money. Even my charity work has been tax-deductible donations that enhance my reputation. This is different. This is committing real resources to something that won't benefit me financially. That's what actual altruism looks like. It's uncomfortable because it requires genuine sacrifice instead of performative generosity. Ethan stood, walking to the window of his office where they'd been meeting. I'm going to do it. Buy the building. Fund the renovation. Set up the operating budget. But Maya, I need you to run it. I don't know how to do this. I'll provide the money and resources. You provide the knowledge and expertise. We do this together. I told you I'm part-time. 20 hours a week. I'm not running a full housing program. Then we hire staff. You oversee them. You design the program. I fund it. Maya, I can't do this without you. I'll just repeat the same mistakes I've always made. Treating people like problems to solve instead of humans who need support. I need you to keep me honest. Maya thought about all the ways this could go wrong, about how Ethan might lose interest once the novelty wore off, about how she might be setting herself up for another burnout, about whether she could trust a billionaire to actually follow through. But she also thought about 200 people currently sleeping in shelters or on the streets who could have stable housing, about the real impact they could make if Ethan was serious, about the fact that she'd been looking for a way to re-enter social work that didn't repeat her previous mistakes. Okay. I'll do it, but full-time, not part-time. If I'm running a housing program, I need to commit fully, and I need $150,000 annually. This is my career, not a side project. Done. $150,000 full benefits, and whatever operating budget you need for the program. Write up the plan. I'll start acquisition on the building. Just like that? You're committing $18 million plus operating costs based on one conversation? I'm committing based on 6 weeks of you teaching me how little I understand about poverty. Based on realizing that my entire life philosophy has been built on lies I told myself about merit and hard work. Based on wanting to do something that actually matters instead of just accumulating more wealth I don't need. Ethan turned back to face her. Maya, I know you don't trust me. I know you think I'll lose interest or revert to being the asshole who played homeless for a social experiment. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can change. To prove that my wealth can do something more useful than buying another investment property. Fine. One chance. But Ethan, if you waste my time, if you treat this like another test or another game, I'm done. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why. Understood. No games, no tests. Just real work helping real people. Starting now. They shook hands and Maya felt the weight of what she'd just committed to. She'd left social work to protect herself from burnout. Now she was diving back in with a billionaire. Partner who'd recently thought poverty was something you could costume yourself into. Understanding this was either the best decision she'd made in years or the worst. Time would tell which. The Riverside Apartments project consumed the next 6 months of Maya's life. She hired staff, social workers, mental health counselors, addiction specialists, case managers. She designed intake procedures that prioritize dignity over bureaucracy. She fought with contractors who wanted to cut corners and with city officials who thought permanent supportive housing was enabling. And she worked alongside Ethan, who surprised her by actually showing up, not just financially but physically. He attended planning meetings, listened to residents' feedback, asked questions that revealed he was genuinely trying to understand instead of just writing checks. The city council is pushing back on our zoning variance, Ethan said during one of their weekly strategy meetings. They're claiming the building will decrease property values in the neighborhood. It's bullshit, but it's bullshit that could delay us 6 months. So use your influence. You know half the city council personally. Call in favors. That's what wealthy people do, right? Use connections to get what you want. Usually I use those connections for my own benefit. Using them to help other people feels weird. Get used to feeling weird. That's what actual altruism is, doing things that don't benefit you. Maya pulled up the construction timeline. We're 3 weeks behind on the renovation. The contractor says it's supply chain issues, but I think they're prioritizing other projects. Can you light a fire under them? Already done. I called this morning. Made it clear that delays would cost them future contracts with Blackwood Properties. They're suddenly finding ways to accelerate. See? You're learning to weaponize your privilege for good instead of just for profit. Character growth. Ethan smiled slightly. You're never going to let me forget the homeless costume thing, are you? Not until you've proven you've actually changed. Right now, you're in the middle of that process. Ask me again in a year whether I trust you. But privately, Maya was starting to believe Ethan's transformation might be real. He'd stopped talking about deserving and undeserving poor. He'd started understanding how trauma and mental illness and systemic barriers created homelessness in ways that had nothing to do with individual virtue. He'd become genuinely angry about policies that criminalized poverty. The shift became undeniable during a city council hearing about the Riverside project. A council member was pontificating about personal responsibility and how providing free housing would discourage people from working. Ethan, usually diplomatic in public, stood up. Councilman Roberts, with respect, that's the same nonsense people said about Social Security and Medicare. You're arguing that suffering motivates people to succeed, but research shows the opposite. Stability enables success. People can't focus on employment when they're worried about where they'll sleep, can't maintain sobriety when they're constantly traumatized by street violence, can't manage mental illness when they have no safe space. Housing first works because it provides the foundation people need to address other challenges. Your approach, making people prove they're worthy before helping them, has failed for decades. Maybe it's time to try something that actually works. The room went silent. Maya watched Councilman Roberts sputter, watched other council members exchange glances, watched the small audience of housing advocates break into applause. That was quite a speech, Maya told Ethan afterward. When did you become an advocate? When I realized that everything I'd believed about poverty was propaganda designed to make wealthy people feel better about inequality. When I understood that I'm not rich because I'm virtuous, I'm rich because I was born into wealth and had opportunities most people never get. When I stopped lying to myself about how the system works. That's the most politically aware thing I've ever heard you say. I'm almost impressed. Almost. I'll be fully impressed when the building is operational and 200 people have stable housing. Talk is easy. Follow through is hard. The Riverside Apartments opened 8 months after Ethan had first committed to the project. 200 formerly homeless individuals moved into clean, safe, one-bedroom apartments with on-site support services. The first month was chaotic. People adjusting to having their own space, staff learning to balance support with autonomy, neighbors complaining about those people being in their neighborhood. But slowly the program found its rhythm. Residents started attending job training, accessing mental health services, building community. Maya watched transformations happen. Not magical overnight changes, but slow, difficult progress that came from having stability for the first time in years. This is working, Ethan said during a 3-month review meeting. Not perfectly. We've had setbacks. But it's working. People are getting better. Staying housed. That's huge. It's one building. 200 people. There are 60,000 homeless people in this city. We've barely made a dent. But Maya couldn't hide her satisfaction. Still, it's more than most billionaires do. You actually built something useful instead of just writing a check and forgetting about it. I couldn't have done it without you, Maya, you designed everything. You hired the staff. You created the culture. I just provided money. You provided money and then didn't interfere. That's rarer than you think. Most wealthy donors want control, want to dictate how their charity works. You let me build what I knew would work instead of imposing your own ideas. Because I finally understood that I don't know what I'm doing. That admitting ignorance is the first step to actually learning. You taught me that. They were sitting in Maya's office, an actual office now, not a corner of a conference room. She'd built a career out of this project, had rebuilt the professional life she'd thought was dead, and she'd done it working with someone who'd started as everything she hated about wealthy people but had become something different, something she was starting to care about in ways that went beyond professional respect. Ethan, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you really do the homeless costume test? I understand the surface reason, testing people's character, but what made you think that was a good idea? What were you actually looking for? Ethan was quiet for a long time. Validation, I think. Proof that I was different from other wealthy people, that I could see through people's facades and identify genuine goodness. It was arrogant. And fundamentally, it was about me feeling superior, feeling like I had some special insight. And now? Now I realize I had no insight. I was performing superiority while being completely ignorant about what poverty actually means. That test wasn't about finding good people. It was about making myself feel good. You were right to call me out. I deserved worse than what you said. I was pretty harsh. You were honest. That's different, and it's what I needed. Someone who wasn't intimidated by my money or impressed by my supposed philanthropy. Someone who saw through the performance to the selfishness underneath. Maya thought about how angry she'd been that first night. How she'd torn up his business card and told him to leave. How she'd almost refused to work with him out of pure spite. How close she'd come to missing this. The project, the progress, the partnership that had developed. I'm glad you came back. To the shelter. I almost kicked you out that second night, but you kept showing up. That mattered. I kept showing up because you were the first person in years who'd been completely honest with me, who treated me like I was capable of change instead of just writing me off as another entitled rich guy. That was a gift, Maya. Even though you were furious with me, I'm still not fully convinced you've changed permanently. Privilege is deeply ingrained. You might revert when things get hard or inconvenient. Then keep holding me accountable. Keep calling me out when I slip back into old patterns. I trust you to tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. That's the most faith anyone's ever placed in me. Usually people want me to make them feel good about themselves. You're asking me to make you uncomfortable. That's unusual. That's what makes you valuable. And Maya, I need to tell you something. Working with you these past months, building this project, seeing you design programs and advocate for people and refuse to compromise on what's right, I've developed feelings that go beyond professional respect. Maya's breath caught. Ethan, I know. It's complicated. You're my consultant. We work together. Getting involved would muddy professional boundaries. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. That I don't look forward to our meetings. That I don't admire everything about how you approach this work. This is a terrible idea. I don't date wealthy people. It never works. The power imbalance is too significant. What if we address the power imbalance? What if we restructured our professional relationship so we're actual equals? How? You own the building. You fund the program. That's inherent power. What if I didn't? What if we converted the Riverside Project into a non-profit with a board? You'd be executive director. I'd be a board member, same as anyone else. My role would be fundraising and advocacy. Your role would be running operations. Separate but equal. No power imbalance. You'd give up control of something you're funding. I'd give up the illusion of control. Maya, you've been running this program from day one. I've just been writing checks and trying not to interfere. Formalizing that arrangement doesn't change the reality. It just makes the structure match what's already happening. Maya wanted to say yes. Wanted to lean into the feelings she'd been suppressing for months. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it safe. I need time to think about this, about whether I can trust that we'd actually be equals, about whether getting involved is worth the risk. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And Maya, regardless of what you decide about us personally, the professional restructuring stands. You should be executive director. This is your program. You deserve the authority and recognition. After Ethan left, Maya sat alone in her office thinking about choices and risks and whether she was brave enough to try something that terrified her. She'd rebuilt her career, built something meaningful, found purpose again after years of burnout. Was she willing to risk that stability for a relationship that might not work? For feelings she wasn't sure she trusted? Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I meant what I said. About all of it. You're remarkable. This program is remarkable, and I'm falling in love with you. Take your time deciding what to do with that information. I'll be here either way. Maya stared at the message, her heart doing complicated things. She'd spent years protecting herself from disappointment, from trusting wealthy people who inevitably let her down, from believing that people could actually change. But Ethan had changed, measurably, meaningfully. He'd gone from performing poverty as a test to actually funding solutions, from seeing homeless people as fundamentally different to understanding that circumstances created outcomes more than character did. Maybe, possibly, she could trust this. Trust him. Trust herself to risk caring about someone who'd started as everything she hated, but had become someone she genuinely respected. She typed back, "Let's restructure the program first. Make sure we're actually equals. Then we can talk about personal feelings. I need to know this is real before I risk everything on it." Ethan's response came immediately. "Deal. I'll have lawyers draft the nonprofit papers tomorrow. We'll do this right. Take our time. Build something sustainable, both professionally and personally. If you'll let me, maybe, ask me again when we're equals. When I can say yes without wondering if I'm just another project you're trying to fix. You're not a project. You're the person who fixed me. That's the difference." Maya smiled despite herself. This was either the beginning of something real, or the setup for the most devastating heartbreak of her life. But looking at everything they'd built, the program, the trust, the partnership, she decided maybe it was worth finding out which. The restructuring of the Riverside Housing Initiative into an independent nonprofit took 3 months. Ethan was true to his word. He established an endowment to fund operations, recruited a diverse board of directors that included formerly homeless individuals, and stepped back from day-to-day control. Maya became executive director with full authority over programming and hiring. They were equals now, at least on paper. "You're still thinking about the power imbalance," Ethan said one evening. They were having dinner at a casual restaurant, not the upscale places he usually frequented, but a neighborhood spot Maya had suggested. "I can see it in how you're holding yourself. Like you're waiting for me to pull rank or override your decisions, because wealthy people always do. Eventually, they say they want equality, but then they get uncomfortable when they're not in control. Have I done that since we restructured? Have I interfered with your decisions or tried to override you?" Maya thought about it honestly. "No, you've been respectful. But it's only been 3 months. The test is what happens when we genuinely disagree about something important. When your vision conflicts with mine, that's when I'll know if this equality is real. Then I guess we'll find out. Because Maya, I'm not perfect at this. I'm going to have opinions. I'm going to disagree with you sometimes. The question is whether I can do that respectfully or whether I'll revert to using money as power. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. That the first time we have a real conflict, you'll remember you're funding everything, and I'll remember I'm dependent on that funding, and we'll stop being equals. So what do? How do I prove this is real, without just waiting for conflict to happen? You can't. That's the problem with trust. It's built slowly through consistency. I need to see you handle disagreement without pulling rank. Need to see you respect my authority even when you don't agree. That takes time. I can give you time. But Maya, while we're building that trust, can we also acknowledge that there's something between us? That this isn't just professional partnership? Maya had been avoiding this conversation for months. Avoiding acknowledging the way her heart sped up when Ethan walked into a room. The way she found excuses to extend their meetings. The way she'd started thinking about him in decidedly unprofessional ways. There is something. But I don't know if we should act on it. Getting involved could complicate everything we've built. Or it could make everything better. Maya, I'm in love with you. Not because you work for me. You don't anymore. Not because I'm trying to save you. You don't need saving. Because you're brilliant and passionate and you make me want to be better than I am. That's not complicated. That's just honest. It's complicated because your wealth will always create power dynamics. Because my childhood of poverty will always make me sensitive to those dynamics. Because mixing personal and professional is risky even when you're equals on paper. So we're careful. We communicate. We check in with each other about power dynamics. We don't let personal feelings override professional judgment. People do this all the time, Maya. Work together and fall in love. We're not special in that regard. We're special in that you're a billionaire and I grew up in shelters. That's not a small difference to navigate. No, it's not. But it's also not insurmountable. If we both want to try. Ethan reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. I want to try. Question is whether you do. Maya looked at his hand, so close to hers. Thought about all the reasons to say no. About protecting herself, maintaining boundaries, keeping things professional. About the safety of distance. Then she thought about the past year. About Ethan showing up at the shelter every week. About him funding a housing project that would never make him money. About him restructuring everything to ensure she had real power. About the way he'd changed from someone she hated to someone she genuinely respected. About the fact that she was tired of protecting herself from possibilities. She closed the distance, her hand covering his. Okay, let's try. But slowly, and with complete honesty about when things feel off. The moment either of us feels the power imbalance creeping back, we address it immediately. Deal? Deal. Complete honesty. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. They started dating carefully, almost academically. Coffee dates where they discussed boundaries. Dinners where they checked in about professional dynamics. Walks where they tried to just be two people interested in each other, without the weight of their complicated history. This feels very formal. Ethan observed after a particularly structured date where they'd literally had an agenda. Are we dating or conducting a business negotiation? Both, kind of. I'm trying to make sure we do this right, that we don't fall into patterns that will hurt us later. Maya, at some point we have to just be together. Without analyzing every interaction. Can we try that? Just one date where we don't talk about power dynamics or professional boundaries. Just talk about ourselves, our lives. Things that have nothing to do with work or wealth or any of it. I don't know if I know how to do that with you. Work is how we connected. Removing that feels artificial. Then let me ask you about things that aren't work. What do you do for fun? What did you want to be when you were a kid? What's your favorite completely impractical dream? Maya realized she didn't have good answers. She'd spent so long in survival mode, through childhood poverty, through social work burnout, through rebuilding her career, that she'd forgotten how to just exist. How to have interests beyond work. How to dream about things that weren't solving problems. I don't know. I used to paint, before everything got so serious. Watercolors mostly. Nothing good, just relaxing. Haven't done it in years. Why not? Because there's too much real work to do. Too many actual problems that need solving. Playing with paint feels indulgent when people are homeless. That's exactly the kind of thinking that led to your burnout the first time. You can't pour from an empty cup, Maya. You're allowed to have a life outside of helping people. You're allowed to be a whole person with interests and hobbies and things that make you happy, says the man who works 70 hours a week building his real estate empire, says the man who's learning that accumulating wealth is empty if you don't have a life worth living. You taught me that. Now let me teach you. Let yourself be more than your work. Even if your work is important, I'll try. But Ethan, you need to understand something. Growing up poor means you never feel safe enough to be indulgent. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the money to run out, for the stability to disappear. Playing with watercolors feels like tempting fate. Then we'll tempt fate together. This weekend, you paint. I don't know. Do something equally impractical. We'll practice being people who have lives beyond work. That Saturday, Ethan showed up at Maya's apartment with art supplies, professional-grade watercolors, good brushes, heavy paper. Everything Maya would need but would never have spent money on for herself. This is too much, she protested. It's supplies for a hobby. That's not too much. That's normal. Maya, let me do nice things for you without assuming it's about power or manipulation. Sometimes a gift is just a gift. They spent the afternoon painting. Maya with her watercolors, Ethan attempting to learn alongside her with predictably terrible results. He splattered paint everywhere, mixed colors into muddy messes, produced paintings that looked like they'd been created by an enthusiastic 5-year-old. This is humiliating, Ethan said, looking at his brown smudge. I'm objectively terrible at this. You're learning. That's different. Not everything has to be something you're immediately good at. You can be bad at things and still enjoy them. I'm not used to being bad at things. I'm used to being competent or not doing them. That's a privilege thing. Poor people are bad at lots of things because we can't afford to only do what we're good at. We do what needs doing whether we're competent or not. Learning to be okay with incompetence is growth. You're very wise. Also very amused by my terrible painting. I'm extremely amused. but also impressed you're trying something you're bad at. That's actual vulnerability, not the performed kind from your homeless costume. Real, I might fail at this vulnerability. You're never letting that costume thing go, are you? Not until I'm convinced you've completely unlearned the entitled thinking that made you think it was okay. We're getting there, but you're not done growing yet. Neither are you. You're learning to accept nice things without seeing them as traps. That's your growth. They painted until the light faded, and Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Light, unburdened, like she was allowed to exist without constantly carrying the weight of other people's suffering. Like she was a person who could play with watercolors on a Saturday without guilt. Thank you, she said quietly, for this. For reminding me I'm allowed to have joy even when the world is broken. Thank you for letting me be part of your life, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one, for teaching me what actually matters. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, and Maya let herself lean into it. Let herself feel something without analyzing it. Let herself be happy without waiting for catastrophe. It was terrifying and exhilarating and everything she'd been protecting herself from. Over the next 3 months, they built a relationship alongside their professional partnership. Learned to navigate disagreements without pulling rank. Learned to check in about power dynamics. Learned to be both colleagues and partners, both professionals and people in love. The test of their equality came during a board meeting about expansion. Ethan wanted to scale rapidly, 5 more buildings in the next 2 years. Maya wanted to scale sustainably, 1 building, perfect the model, then expand thoughtfully. We have the funding, Ethan argued. We have the need. Why wait? Because rapid scaling often fails. Because we need to learn from this building before replicating. Because sustainability matters more than speed. Maya kept her voice level, professional. I understand you want to help more people faster. But I won't compromise the quality of what we're building for speed. Even if that means people stay homeless while we perfect our model. Even then, because a program that fails helps no one. We do this right or we don't do it at all. The board watched them, clearly uncomfortable with the disagreement. Ethan's jaw was tight, his frustration visible. Maya waited to see if he'd defer to her authority as executive director, or if he'd try to override her using his position as major funder. You're the expert, Ethan said finally. If you think sustainable growth is better, we'll do it your way. But Maya, I want regular evaluations. I want to know when we're ready to scale. Because you're right that quality matters, but you're also right that people are suffering while we wait. Agreed. Quarterly evaluations. We scale when the data shows we're ready. Not before. After the meeting, Ethan found Maya in her office. That was hard. Stepping back when I disagree. Every instinct told me to push harder. To use my funding as leverage. But you didn't. You deferred to my expertise. That's what equality looks like. I hated it. I wanted to control the outcome. That's my default. Control everything because I have the resources to do it. But you're learning to trust. To let someone else have authority. That's growth, Ethan. Real growth. I'm growing because you make me. Because you don't let me slide back into old patterns. Maya, you make me better. At work, at life. At being human, I love you for that. I love you too. Even though you're still an entitled rich guy who has to actively fight his worst instincts. And you're still a stubborn social worker who won't let me get away with anything. That's why we work. You need someone who won't let you be lazy about growth. I need someone who can fund my impossible dreams. We balance each other. So we're doing this? Actually building a life together? Not just professionally, but personally? We're doing this. Carefully, thoughtfully, with complete honesty about when things feel wrong. But yes. We're doing this. Bölüm 5 toplam kelime sayısı. Tam 2000 kelime. The media discovered Maya and Ethan's relationship 6 months after they'd made it official. A gossip columnist ran a piece titled Billionaires. Homeless experiment leads to romance that completely mischaracterized how they'd met and what their relationship meant. They're making it sound like you were homeless. And I saved you, Ethan said, reading the article with disgust. Like this is some kind of pretty woman fantasy where the rich man rescues the poor woman. That's how wealth always frames relationships with class differences, as rescue narratives. Because acknowledging that poor people have agency and wealthy people have privilege to examine is too complicated. Maya was furious. They're erasing everything I built, making me a project you fixed instead of a professional you collaborated with. We need to correct this. Issue a statement. Make it clear that you're an accomplished professional who built a program I'm lucky to be part of. They won't care. The rescue narrative is more compelling. People want to believe wealthy men save poor women because it makes inequality feel romantic instead of structural. But the article triggered something else. Investigative journalists started digging into Ethan's past. Within a week, a major news outlet published an expose. The truth about Ethan Blackwood's self-made fortune. The article laid out everything Ethan had told Maya in confidence. The inherited wealth, the trust fund, the fact that his self-made billionaire story was carefully constructed PR. It included quotes from former business partners describing Ethan as ruthless, from tenants describing predatory rental practices, from employees describing a cutthroat corporate culture. "This is who I was," Ethan said, reading the article with visible distress. "Everything they're saying is true. I did all of this. Before I met you, before I understood what my wealth was built on, did you?" Maya looked at the details about rent increases that displaced low-income tenants, about aggressive acquisition strategies that destroyed small property owners, about employee practices that prioritized profit over people. "Ethan, you told me you inherited wealth and grew it. You didn't tell me you grew it by crushing people?" "I didn't think about it that way at the time. It was just business, maximizing returns. I didn't see the human cost. But you knew. On some level, you knew you were hurting people. You just decided their suffering was acceptable collateral damage for your profit." "Yes, I knew. And I told myself it was fine, because that's how business works. That's how wealth is built. I didn't let myself think about the actual people being affected. That's the privilege you've been trying to make me understand. The ability to not see the consequences of my actions." Maya felt sick. She'd known Ethan had been entitled, had known he'd built wealth through real estate. But seeing the specific details, families displaced, small businesses destroyed, employees exploited, made it visceral in ways his abstract admission hadn't. "I need time to process this, to figure out if I can be with someone who did these things. Maya, I'm not that person anymore. You know I've changed, have you? Or have you just added charity to your portfolio while keeping the exploitative business practices that fund it?" Maya pulled up Blackwood Properties' recent transactions. "You're still raising rents on low-income tenants, still buying buildings and displacing residents, still running the same business model that creates homelessness. You've built one housing project while your core business creates the problem you're supposedly solving." Ethan looked at the data, his face draining of color. I didn't think about it that way. I separated the charity work from the business. Told myself they were different things. They're not different. You can't create homelessness with one hand while solving it with the other and call yourself reformed. That's not change. That's PR. So what do? Shut down my business? Give away all my wealth? I don't know. But Ethan, if you're serious about having changed, you need to change everything. Not just how you spend your free time. How you make money. How you build wealth. The fundamental model of your business. Otherwise, you're just performing altruism while perpetuating the systems that create suffering. That's not fair. You can't expect me to completely dismantle my business. I'm not expecting anything. I'm telling you that if you want me to believe you've genuinely changed, I need to see that change extend to how you make money, not just how you spend it. Otherwise, you're still the person who thinks you can costume yourself into understanding poverty, just with more elaborate costumes. The conversation ended badly, with Ethan defensive and Maya disappointed. They didn't speak for 3 days. Maya threw herself into work, trying not to think about how she'd let herself trust someone who was still fundamentally complicit in creating the problem she was trying to solve. On the 4th day, Ethan requested a meeting. Not at his office, not at the housing project, at St. Mary's Shelter where they'd first argued about his homeless costume. "I've spent the past 3 days with accountants and lawyers," Ethan said without preamble. "Going through every property I own, every business practice, every revenue stream. You're right. My business creates the problems I'm claiming to solve. I raise rents to maximize returns. I buy buildings and displace residents to renovate for wealthier tenants. I operate the same exploitative model as every other real estate developer. And I told myself it was fine because I was donating some of the profits to charity. So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm restructuring everything. Converting my entire portfolio to fair housing. Capping rents at percentages of median income, creating tenant protections that prevent displacement, establishing resident councils that give tenants actual power over building decisions. It's going to cost me hundreds of millions in reduced profits. But Maya, you're right. I can't claim to have changed while still making money from exploitation. Maya stared at him. You're willing to sacrifice that much profit? It's not sacrifice. It's correction. I built wealth by extracting value from people who couldn't afford it. That was theft dressed up as business. Returning to fair practices isn't sacrifice. It's restitution. Your investors will revolt. Your board will try to stop you. I own controlling interest. They can complain, but they can't stop me. And honestly, if they quit because I'm treating tenants ethically, good riddance. I don't want partners who think exploitation is acceptable. This is going to tank your net worth. You could lose billions. I could. Probably will. But Maya, what good is wealth built on suffering? What good is calling myself reformed while profiting from the systems I claim to oppose? You were right to call me out. This is what actual change looks like. Not just charity. Structural transformation of how I make money in the first place. Maya felt tears threatening. You're serious? You're actually willing to dismantle the business model that made you wealthy? I am. Because you made me see that anything less is hypocrisy. That I can't love you while profiting from systems that create the poverty you've spent your life fighting. That if I want to be worthy of you, I need to be someone whose values aren't situational. Who doesn't just perform ethics but actually lives them. Ethan, this is huge. This is transformative. This is the kind of change I've wanted to see from wealthy people my entire life. Then help me do it right. Help me restructure these buildings in ways that actually serve tenants. Help me create policies that prevent displacement. Help me build a business model that generates profit without exploitation. I can't do this without you. I don't know how. You're asking me to help you dismantle extractive capitalism in real estate? That's impossible. That's fighting an entire industry. I'm asking you to help me try. To show that it's possible to run a profitable business without creating suffering. To prove that ethics and economics don't have to be opposing forces. Maya, you've already done it with the housing project. Help me do it with everything else. Maya thought about the magnitude of what he was proposing, about how most wealthy people talked about reform, but never actually changed their business practices, about how Ethan was offering to sacrifice billions to align his economics with his supposed ethics. Okay, I'll help. But Ethan, if you back out when you see the actual cost, when you see how much money you're leaving on the table, we're done. Personally and professionally, I can't be with someone who performs transformation but doesn't follow through. I won't back out. This is who I want to be. Someone who makes money ethically, who builds wealth without creating poverty, who proves that business can serve people instead of exploiting them. Help me become that person. They spent the next 6 months restructuring Blackwood Properties into something unprecedented. A profitable real estate company that prioritized tenant welfare over maximum returns. They capped rents, established tenant councils, created anti-displacement policies, built in affordability requirements. The business community called Ethan crazy. Investors fled. Competitors mocked him for leaving money on the table. But tenants' lives improved dramatically. Displacement dropped to near zero. Community stability increased. And the buildings remained profitable, just not maximally so. I'm worth about 40% less than I was a year ago, Ethan told Maya during a review of the financial impact. Lost about $1 billion in net worth. My accountant thinks I'm insane. Are you regretting it? Not even a little. Maya, I sleep better now than I have in years. Because my wealth isn't built on suffering anymore. Because I can look tenants in the eye without feeling guilty. Because I'm actually living my supposed values instead of just performing them on weekends. You've done something extraordinary. You've proven that ethical real estate is possible. That profit and people don't have to be opposing forces. That's huge, Ethan. That's the kind of structural change that could transform entire industries if other wealthy people followed your model. They won't. Most wealthy people aren't willing to sacrifice profit for ethics. I only did it because you forced me to choose. Between you and maximum returns, between being the person I claimed to be and the person I actually was, you chose well. I chose you. Everything else followed from that choice. The transformation of Ethan's business had ripple effects. Other developers started asking questions about ethical models. Tenant advocacy groups used Blackwood Properties as proof that change was possible. Media coverage shifted from mocking the homeless costume incident to highlighting how Ethan had actually reformed his entire business model. You're becoming famous for the right reasons now, Maya observed, reading an article titled, How One Billionaire is Revolutionizing Ethical Real Estate. Not for tests or costumes or performative charity, for actually changing systems. We're becoming famous. You designed half these policies. You created the tenant council model. You figured out how to make ethical practices profitable. This isn't just my transformation. It's ours. I appreciate that. But Ethan, you're the one who sacrificed $1 billion. You're the one who chose ethics over profit. That's your choice. Your growth. I helped, but the decision was yours. The decision was easy once I understood what was at stake. Lose money or lose my integrity. Lose returns or lose you. Those weren't hard choices. Money is just numbers. Integrity and love are everything. That's the most profound thing you've ever said, and proof that you've actually changed. The person who wore a homeless costume to test people wouldn't have understood that money is just numbers. You thought wealth was identity. Now you understand it's just a tool I'm learning to use ethically. Thanks to you. Maya, I know we've had a rocky road. Started with me being an entitled asshole. Had setbacks when my privilege showed. But we're here now. Equals. Partners. Both professionally and personally. That's worth every dollar I've lost. Every investor who's quit. Every person who thinks I'm crazy. You are a little crazy. Who voluntarily loses $1 billion? Someone who's in love with a woman who won't tolerate exploitation. Someone who wants to be worthy of that woman. Someone who's learned that being wealthy means nothing if you're morally bankrupt. Maya kissed him. There in the office where they'd had so many difficult conversations about privilege and power and what actual change required. I love you. The you that you've become. The person who's willing to sacrifice wealth for values. Who's learning that power means responsibility, not control. Who's proving that change is possible even for billionaires. I love you too. The you who never let me get away with anything. Who demanded I become better. Who showed me what actual integrity looks like. Maya Torres, you saved me. Not from homelessness, I was never at risk. But from moral poverty. From a life built on exploitation, disguised as success. That's the real transformation. Not financial, moral. We saved each other. I was burning out, losing faith that change was possible. You proved that even someone from extreme privilege could learn, grow, and transform. That gave me hope, made me believe this work matters. That's everything. They stood together in the office of the nonprofit they'd built, looking at data showing declining homelessness and improving tenant outcomes. Looking at proof that ethical business was possible. Looking at evidence that people could change if they were willing to do the uncomfortable work. We're doing something meaningful, Ethan said. Changing systems. Proving alternatives are possible. That's a legacy worth building. Then let's keep building. Together. Equals. Partners in reforming how wealth operates in this city. Partners in everything. I like the sound of that. 3 years after Ethan had walked into the Harrison wearing a homeless costume, Maya stood in front of the National Housing Coalition's annual conference, about to receive their Innovator Award for transforming supportive housing models. Ethan sat in the audience watching with pride as Maya was recognized for work that had started with her fury at his entitled social experiment. When I met Ethan Blackwood, Maya began her acceptance speech. He was everything I hated about wealthy people. Performative, entitled, treating poverty as a costume he could put on to test people's morality. I told him to get out of my restaurant, called him disgusting, tore up his business card. It was not an auspicious beginning. The audience laughed. The story of their combative first meeting had become legendary in housing advocacy circles. But Ethan did something wealthy people rarely do. He actually listened. He came back, not to defend himself, not to explain why I was wrong, but to learn, to understand why his test had been offensive. To see poverty as lived reality instead of abstract concept. And slowly, painfully, with a lot of difficult conversations and uncomfortable growth, he transformed. Not into a perfect person, he's still working on unlearning privilege, but into someone who's willing to sacrifice profit for ethics. Someone who's restructured his entire business model to stop creating the problems he was supposedly solving. Maya looked at Ethan, who smiled back with the kind of genuine warmth that no longer surprised her. This award isn't just mine. It's ours. The work we've built together. The Riverside Housing Initiative that proved supportive housing works. The ethical real estate model that showed profit and people don't have to oppose each other. The policy advocacy that's changing how this city approaches homelessness. None of it would exist if Ethan hadn't been willing to change. If I hadn't been willing to give him the chance. If we hadn't both committed to building something better than what existed before. After the ceremony, they drove to St. Mary's Shelter, still volunteering there every Thursday. Still serving meals and listening to stories and remembering where they'd started. Father Michael greeted them with his usual warmth. Our celebrity volunteers. How does it feel to be famous? Exhausting, Maya admitted. Everyone wants to replicate our model. Which is great, but it means constant speaking engagements, consultations, media requests. Sometimes I miss when we were just serving dinner and nobody cared. You're making real change happen. That's worth the exhaustion, Father Michael said. Maya, do you remember the first night Ethan showed up here? You looked ready to physically throw him out. I was ready to physically throw him out. He'd just revealed his homeless costume test. I was furious, and I was clueless, Ethan added. Thought I was doing something profound. Had no idea how offensive it was. Now look at you. Building housing. Reforming business practices. Changing systems. That's quite a transformation from a social experiment gone wrong. It's a transformation that almost didn't happen, Maya said. I came very close to refusing to work with him. If he hadn't kept showing up, hadn't genuinely tried to learn, we wouldn't be here. But I did show up. Because you gave me a reason to, Maya, you made me want to be better. Made me see that the person I was, the entitled billionaire testing humanity, was someone I didn't want to be. That's the gift you gave me, the courage to change. They served dinner together, falling into the familiar rhythm they'd developed over 3 years. Maya ladling soup, Ethan distributing bread. Both of them talking to residents with genuine respect, remembering names and stories. Treating people as people instead of problems. You're different now, Marcus, a long-term resident, told Ethan. When you first started coming here, you looked scared, like you didn't know how to talk to us. Now you're comfortable, real. What changed? I stopped seeing you all as different from me. Stopped thinking homelessness was something that happened to other kinds of people. Started understanding that circumstances create outcomes more than character does. That I'm here serving dinner instead of asking for dinner because of luck, not virtue. That's growth. Most rich people never figure that out. They think they earned everything. That we failed at everything. You learned different. Because people taught me. Especially Maya. She never let me get away with comfortable lies about merit and hard work. Made me confront how much of my success was unearned privilege. After their volunteer shift, Maya and Ethan walked through the city, talking about next steps. The housing model was being replicated in 6 cities. The ethical real estate framework was gaining traction. But there was still so much more to do. I want to start a foundation, Ethan said. Not just for housing. For teaching wealthy people to use their privilege responsibly. Teaching them what you taught me. That wealth is responsibility, not proof of virtue. That business can serve people, not just extract from them. That change is possible if you're willing to sacrifice comfort. That's ambitious. Most wealthy people don't want to hear that their success is partly luck. They're invested in the meritocracy myth. Then we challenge that myth. Show them alternative models. Prove that ethical business is possible and profitable. Not maximally profitable, but sustainable. That's what you helped me understand. That enough is enough. That accumulating wealth beyond what you can use is just hoarding resources others need. You want to teach billionaires to be less greedy. That's possibly the most difficult mission in the world, but necessary. Because individual charity doesn't fix systemic problems. We need wealthy people to change how they make money, not just how they spend it. To stop creating poverty in their business practices while performing altruism in their charity. That's the transformation that actually matters. Then let's do it. Build a foundation that trains wealthy people to be ethical, to use their resources responsibly, to stop perpetuating inequality while pretending to solve it. They spent the next year developing the curriculum, drawing on Ethan's transformation as a case study. They taught about privilege, about structural inequality, about how business practices create poverty. They brought in formerly homeless people to share their stories. They required participants to actually volunteer, not just write checks. They made it uncomfortable, challenging, impossible to just perform interest without genuine change. The response was mixed. Some wealthy people embraced it, transforming their businesses the way Ethan had. Others got defensive, complained the training was too political, accused Maya and Ethan of demonizing success. But slowly, a network emerged. Business leaders committed to ethical practices, willing to sacrifice maximum profit for social responsibility, proving that alternatives to extractive capitalism were possible. We're building a movement, Maya said during one of their strategy sessions. Not a big movement. Most wealthy people still prioritize profit over ethics, but a meaningful one. People who are actually changing systems instead of just donating to charity. That's more than I ever thought possible. When I put on that homeless costume, I thought I was testing other people's morality. Now I understand I was the one who needed testing, who needed to fail that test so badly that I'd be forced to change. You did fail. Spectacularly. That costume was one of the most offensive things I'd ever witnessed. And you told me so. Didn't sugarcoat it. Didn't make it easy. That's what I needed. Someone who cared enough to be brutally honest. Who wouldn't let me off the hook for being wealthy or well-intentioned or trying. You demanded actual change. That's love, Maya. Real love. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that challenges you to be better. You've definitely gotten better. From entitled billionaire to ethical business leader to teacher of other wealthy people. That's quite an arc. It's an arc you created. Every step was because you pushed me. Refused to accept performative change. Demanded I restructure my entire business model, not just my weekend activities. You're relentless in the best way. Someone has to be. Left to your own devices, you'd still be maximizing profit and donating 5% to charity and calling yourself reformed. Probably true. I needed someone who wouldn't accept half measures. Who understood that real change means sacrifice, not just redistribution of surplus wealth. 6 months later, they stood in front of the city council again, this time advocating for policy changes that would require all major real estate developers to include affordable housing in new developments. Ethan testified about how ethical practices were possible and profitable. Maya presented data on housing stability and economic benefits. Together, they argued that the city could address homelessness through policy, not just charity. You're asking us to mandate that private businesses sacrifice profit for social good. One council member objected. That's not how capitalism works. Then maybe capitalism needs to work differently, Ethan replied. Because the current model creates massive suffering while generating enormous wealth for a few. That's not sustainable. It's not moral, and it's not necessary. My company proves that ethical practices can be profitable. Not maximally profitable, but sustainable. We should be requiring that. Making it the baseline, not the exception. Easy for you to say when you're already wealthy. What about developers who need maximum returns to survive? If your business model requires creating homelessness to survive, you have a bad business model. We should be helping businesses transition to ethical practices, not protecting exploitative ones. Maya leaned forward. Council members, you have the power to change this. To require that development serves community needs, not just developer profits. That's not radical. That's governing responsibly. The council ultimately passed a modified version of their proposal, not as strong as they'd wanted, but meaningful progress. Requirements for affordable housing in new developments, tenant protections against displacement, funding for supportive housing, small changes that would accumulate into real impact over time. We're winning, Ethan said as they left the council chambers, slowly with setbacks. But we're actually changing policy, creating requirements that will outlast both of us. Building systems that work better than what existed before. We still have so far to go. This city still has thousands of homeless people. Tens of thousands living in precarious housing. Hundreds of thousands one emergency away from losing everything. But it's better than it was. That's what matters, not perfection. Progress. We've housed hundreds of people. Changed business practices. Created policy. That's real impact, Maya. That's worth everything we've invested. That evening, Ethan proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or elaborate event, but in Maya's apartment. Surrounded by watercolor paintings she'd started creating again. Simple, honest, real. Maya Torres, you've transformed my entire life. Challenged everything I believed. Forced me to become someone better than I was. You've loved me at my worst and celebrated me at my best. You've been my partner in building something meaningful. I want to keep doing this. Keep building together. Keep challenging and supporting and transforming systems. Will you marry me? Maya looked at the ring, simple silver band, no enormous diamond, exactly her style, and at Ethan, the person who'd been everything wrong about wealthy people and had become someone she genuinely respected and loved. Yes. But Ethan, I need you to know something. I'm never going to stop challenging you, never going to let you slide back into comfortable privilege, never going to accept performative change instead of real transformation. That's who I am. I'm the person who will always push you to be better. Can you live with that? I'm counting on it. Maya, I don't want comfortable. I want real. I want someone who keeps me honest. Who demands I live my values instead of just performing them. That's you. That's what I'm signing up for. A lifetime of being challenged to be better. Then yes, I'll marry you. We'll keep building together. Keep transforming systems. Keep proving that change is possible even in structures designed to resist it. They married 6 months later at St. Mary's Shelter, surrounded by the community where they'd both been transformed. Father Michael officiated. Residents attended. Formerly homeless people who'd found stability through their program celebrated. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't elaborate. It was real. "I promise to keep challenging you," Maya said during her vows. "To never let you forget that wealth is responsibility, not proof of worth. To push you toward justice even when it's uncomfortable. To love you enough to demand you be your best self." "I promise to keep learning," Ethan replied. "To stay uncomfortable with privilege. To use my resources for justice, not just comfort. To be worthy of your love by becoming someone who actually lives the values I claim. To transform continuously, not just once." They kissed, and the shelter erupted in applause. Not polite society applause. Real, joyful celebration from people who'd watched them both transform. Who'd witnessed Ethan's journey from entitled billionaire to ethical advocate. Who'd seen Maya rebuild her career and her faith in change. "You did it," Father Michael told them afterward. "Built something beautiful from something offensive. Transformed a social experiment into actual social change. That's grace, real grace." "We're not done," Maya said. "There's still so much more to change. So many more systems to transform. Then keep going. Together. That's how transformation happens. One person challenging another to be better. One business changing its model. One policy at a time. You've proven it's possible. Now keep proving it." Walking out of the shelter as a married couple, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not naive hope that everything would be fixed easily, but grounded hope that change was possible, that people could transform, that systems could be built differently, that wealth could serve justice instead of opposing it. "Ready to keep building?" Ethan asked, squeezing her hand. "Always. Let's change the world. One uncomfortable conversation at a time. That's my wife. Relentlessly optimistic about uncomfortable change. And that's my husband. Continuously transforming from who he was into who he's becoming. We're quite a team. The best team. Let's prove that transformation is possible. That even billionaires can learn. That even broken systems can be fixed. Together." They walked into the evening, hands intertwined, ready to keep challenging and changing and building. Not perfectly. Not easily. But genuinely. That was everything.